A new location, a little bit more elegant. That's all because of a new section. Hello guys, one more time and welcome to Ring Royalty. My name is Alexis, as you already know, and today I have a new microphone, I'm in a new location, sort of, and I am bringing you a new segment into this channel. The name will be The Rise and Fall. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but let me explain the drill very fast. I'm going to choose one superstar per video and I'm going to talk about their careers, how they reach the top of the mountain just to fall very low in the years after their prime. Now, let's remember that this is not my opinion. I am just doing research and I am stating everything that happened. Maybe I would just say one comment here and there, but most of these things are facts, so don't come for me. I hope you like this type of video. I'm sure you will let me know in the comments and with the likes, but it's never bad to letting you know that I am expecting some feedback from you. Without any further to say, let's start with the first video of Rise and Fall, and my topic of today, or the superstar of the day, will be the Empress of Tomorrow, Asuka. So Asuka is a Japanese pro wrestler formerly known as Kana, but when she moved to the United States to compete as a member of the NXT roster in October 2015, she changed her name to Asuka. She was presented to the crowd as the greatest acquisition in NXT history, and she actually was. Her unique moveset and her style in the ring definitely changed the game in the whole women's division. NXT already had an amazing women's division, but Asuka just helped elevate it even more. Her first match was at TakeOver Respect in 2015 against Dana Brooke, when she destroyed Dana and showed everyone what she's capable of. After that victory against Dana Brooke, she just solidified herself during the next 6 months by defeating many different jobbers and mid-carders in the NXT division. Mid-carders such as Dana Brooke or Emma. With the mid-carders, she had great matches. One example was TakeOver London in 2015, where she faced Emma. Such an underrated match. It was so good. And she didn't stop her reign of dominance until April 2016, when she challenged Bayley for the NXT Women's Championship at NXT TakeOver Dallas. This was one of the best matches that we have seen in a while, ever since Bayley against Sasha Banks. They tore the house down and Asuka became the NXT Women's Champion by making Bayley pass out in the Asuka lock. Such an amazing way to prove her dominance and establish herself as the champion of the greatest division in the whole WWE. NXT was definitely Asuka's queendom. She never lost the NXT Women's Championship, having instant classic title defenses against the likes of Bayley at NXT TakeOver Brooklyn 2, Mickie James at NXT TakeOver Toronto, at NXT TakeOver The End with Nia Jax, Brooklyn 3 with Ember Moon, in NXT TV against Nikki Cross in a last women's standing match. All of these matches were gold, and the reason why they were so great is because Asuka was so dominant. It was not only exciting to see her in the ring each and every time, but you also get the bonus of waiting for someone to dethrone Asuka. She was a force to be reckoned with. She was intimidating. She was an irresistible force for sure. You see what I did there? Irresistible force, not Nia Jax, because well, we'll talk about her in other video probably. She relinquished the NXT Women's Championship after 523 days of title reign, and she moved to the Raw roster. Now let's stop here before going to Monday Night Raw and think about what Asuka did. She revolutionized the NXT Women's division. She brought instant classics. She had one of the greatest rivalries ever with Ember Moon, and she also accomplished many other things just than memorable matches and a lengthy title reign, such as Female Superstar of the Year in 2016 and 17, and also overall Superstar of the Year in 2017 for the NXT End of the Year Awards. And there was even also a biggest accomplishment, as she was ranked #1 in the PWI Insider Top Women of the Year. She was the best of the best. In 2017, when Asuka left NXT. She was at the peak of the mountain. She was probably the most popular female performer in the whole WWE, despite having the 4 horsewomen already on the main roster. And Asuka did all of that on her own. She couldn't even cut promos as she didn't know English that well, but she didn't even need to talk. She was so amazing in the ring. Her moveset was so great, and the mystique that her character had was enough to make her a superstar. She didn't need to talk. And that is something that I will mention later on in her career, but so far so great. Asuka at this point was a huge star, and it was undeniable that on the main roster she was going to tear the house down and even do greater things. After NXT, she moved to the main roster, most specifically on Raw, where she had her debut match at the TLC pay-per-view in 2017, where she defeated former rival Emma. And then again the night after, on her Raw debut, she defeated Emma again, who was mysteriously fired after that match. I am not sure what happened with Emma, but she's not the topic of this video, so let's go back to Asuka. On Raw, she accomplished many things. She continued with her undefeated streak, defeating the likes of Alicia Fox, a former Divas champion, Sasha Banks, a former Raw Women's champion, and also Mickie James, Alexa Bliss, Nia Jax, and basically everyone in the Raw Women's division. She accomplished many other things on the main roster and had huge and memorable moments. For example, she was the sole survivor for the Raw team that year, and in January 2018, she made even more history by winning the first ever WWE Women's Royal Rumble match. She entered at 25 and defeated everyone else, eliminating Nikki Bella last to become the inaugural winner of this monumental match. It was so great, and a lot of people were worried because so many superstars that moved from NXT to the main roster lost a lot of momentum and actually looked like a joke in some cases, but Asuka's particular case wasn't like that, or at least up to this point. She was making history time and time again, and after she defeated everyone basically on the Raw Women's division, including the Raw Women's champion Alexa Bliss at the time, and she also won the Royal Rumble match, a lot of people were speculating who was she going to face. And let's face it, Alexa Bliss is a great character, she's a great talker, but she's no match for Asuka in the ring. So what most people already suspected happened. At the Fastlane pay-per-view, Asuka came out and challenged Charlotte Flair, who was the Smackdown Women's Champion at the time, for a title match at WrestleMania. The Queen against the Empress. That was best for business. First of all, because they haven't crossed paths yet. And there is something else to add there, the fact that Charlotte Flair was basically the face of the women's division back then, and Asuka was the undefeated threat that Charlotte has never faced. It made a lot of sense storyline wise to make these two have the title match at WrestleMania. After Fastlane, the build-up to this match wasn't that great, as Asuka was part of the main roster on Raw while Charlotte was on Smackdown. But then again, that doesn't take away anything from the match. They put an instant classic. So many great spots in this match, with the Spanish Fly from Charlotte, a lot of stiff kicks from Asuka, Asuka locking in the Asuka lock and Charlotte surviving, and then the moment of truth, Charlotte ending Asuka's undefeated streak. Up to this point, Asuka has never been pinned or submitted in WWE, and her undefeated streak was ended in the grandest stage of them all. Am I happy with it? No. Were fans happy with it back then? Probably not, because Charlotte was overrated already. But I guess if you think about it, it wasn't that bad. At least she didn't lose it in a meaningless match. It was probably the biggest match in Asuka's career up to that point. Her undefeated streak ended after 914 days of being a complete GOAT. The best in the business, never defeated. How do you defeat the undefeated? Well, let's ask Charlotte Flair, because she did that. Now, this iconic match wasn't just the end of Asuka's undefeated streak, but it was also Asuka's last match as a member of the Raw roster, because 2 weeks later, thanks to the Superstars shakeup, she was moved to SmackDown. Now, something that I want to point out before talking about her Smackdown run is the fact that she never recovered from that loss against Charlotte at WrestleMania. We really have to agree that Asuka lost her mystique after that loss. And not because it was wrong that Asuka finally lost the match, but the fact that her booking just went downhill after she was not undefeated anymore. And what's the first big example of this? The fact that her first serious rivalry as part of the SmackDown roster was against the SmackDown Women's Champion at the time, Carmella, who cashed in her Money in the Bank briefcase to dethrone Charlotte Flair. Feuding with Carmella could have been great, but what's the bad side of it? She had 2 title matches against Carmella, the first one at Money in the Bank and the next one at Extreme Rules. Now, what was the problem with these matches and this specific rivalry? The fact that Asuka was treated as a joke. Why? She has been undefeated for 914 days. And you're gonna tell me that Carmella is going to defeat Asuka just because of James Ellsworth's distractions? Really? I mean, we all know that Asuka can kick both Carmella and James Ellsworth's ass if she wanted to, but they made Asuka look so dumb, especially when she lost at Money in the Bank just because James Ellsworth was wearing her robe and mask. She was looking everywhere, she was confused, but it wasn't believable. We're talking about Asuka, the Empress of Tomorrow, the one that has defeated each and every woman in step in front of her for over 2 years. What's going on? And then when they did the stipulation with the shark cage where Ellsworth couldn't actually intervene in the match, but he did anyways, and then Carmella knocked Asuka out by hitting her head against the shark cage, I don't know. I would have preferred to see something else, maybe Carmella retaining by counter or disqualification and interference from another woman, but James Ellsworth didn't do it for me. And I am not sure if you would agree with me, but this rivalry hurt Asuka's character and momentum even more than losing to Charlotte Flair at WrestleMania. After this rivalry, she disappeared for a couple months, and she returned to save Naomi from the Iconics. Now, Asuka apparently was going to be introduced in the tag team division. I mean, why not? It was something fresh, right? I guess. This partnership with Naomi creating the Empress Glow resulted in a match at WWE Super Showdown 2018 where Asuka and Naomi faced the Iconics in a tag team match. Now let's highlight that this event happened in Australia, so obviously the Iconics got the win. Nothing wrong with that, I love the Iconics. So sad they were released, but I mean, once again, I'm getting off topic. But it was such a shame for Asuka because once again, she was losing matches. I know she wasn't the one that got pinned, it was Naomi, but still, Asuka continued in the losing end of all of her rivalries. And this is a clear example that WWE was actually losing faith in Asuka. Why? Because after this tag team feud was over, and at WWE Evolution, the first all-women's pay-per-view ever, Asuka didn't even have an important match. She was thrown into this battle royal mess, which was basically to feed all the women that didn't have any storyline coming into this pay-per-view, and they were going to be rewarded with a championship opportunity in the future. I mean, that was not bad, but the fact that Asuka, who was at the top of the company just earlier that year winning the Women's Royal Rumble and headlining WrestleMania, couldn't even get a decent or proper rivalry match at Evolution? Any way you see it, this is a downgrade, and this is showing that WWE already dropped the ball on Asuka. They didn't have any plans for her. I mean, that was a bit disrespectful if you ask me. But things started to brighten up after a while. Coming TLC on December 2018, Asuka won a Battle Royal to be part of the first ever women's table, ladders, and chairs match for the SmackDown Women's Championship. Finally, Asuka was back in the title hunt, but with a relevant opponent and in a high-profile match. The match was a banger. They killed it. There were so many good spots, and they used absolutely everything they had in hand. Candlesticks, chairs, tables, ladders, the stairs. It was so good. I know some people were unhappy to see Ronda Rousey interfere in this match and be basically the decisive factor for the outcome of this match. I am not really mad about it because they were following a storyline, and this led to Asuka winning her first championship on the main roster. She became the SmackDown Women's Champion in that TLC match, and it looked like WWE was going to take her seriously again. I have to give kudos to Asuka because that match was amazing, and it was so refreshing to see someone as champion who wasn't Becky or Charlotte or any of the 4 horsewomen for that matter. Asuka kept the momentum for a couple months as she had a spectacular title defense at the 2019 Royal Rumble pay-per-view against Becky Lynch, the former champion. She then had an okay title defense against Mandy Rose at Fastlane, and this is where everything started to go downhill again. The apparent rise of Asuka was cut short. Asuka was robbed of a match at WrestleMania 35. Why? Because Vince McMahon didn't believe anyone cared about Asuka or any other women in the SmackDown Women's division. And if you remember correctly, what happened to Asuka, who was the champion and had absolutely no plans to be on the WrestleMania card? She lost her SmackDown Women's Championship in an impromptu match against Charlotte Flair just 2 weeks before Mania. This was an insult, and once again, this showed that WWE didn't take Asuka seriously anymore. The only reason why she was important was because she was undefeated. After that was gone, Asuka's push was long gone too. I felt so mad for her. I mean, there is no other way to explain it. I felt so mad that Charlotte just robbed Asuka from the SmackDown Women's Championship and from an opportunity to be at WrestleMania. I know it's not Charlotte's fault because that's Vince McMahon's booking, but still it pisses me off. Charlotte didn't need a championship, and Asuka deserved a title match at WrestleMania where she comes in as the champion. After WrestleMania season was gone, Asuka was gone for a little while, and then Paige returned to introduce to everyone her new team that she will be managing, which consists of Asuka and new NXT call-up Kairi Sane called the Kabuki Warriors. It was such a forced babyface team. I get that Asuka and Kairi Sane are both Japanese and have some things in common, but it just looks so random. Bringing the Pirate Princess with the Empress of Tomorrow and being managed by Paige, who is the anti-diva, like, what the hell was that? After a couple months, they got a Women's Tag Team Championship opportunity against the Iconics, which they won but by count out, so that means they didn't win the titles. Classic. And then they lost a Fatal 4-Way elimination match where Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross won the championships for the first time. Asuka and Kairi Sane were just pushed to the side so Alexa can win another championship. Was it necessary? No. And another thing that hurt Asuka's character, but by this point Asuka barely had any momentum anyway, so we're talking about a big downgrade in her career. From April to October, the Kabuki Warriors were basically doing nothing, so it was such a waste of time. Until Paige disappeared for a while and the Kabuki Warriors got a championship match on October 2019 against Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross. Surprise, surprise! Asuka debuted the Green Mist to blind Nikki Cross and get the championship for her and Kairi Sane. They became the WWE Women's Tag Team Champions for the first time, and Asuka won her second championship on the main roster. Such a good moment, and finally Asuka turned heel. That was something that elevated her once more, because she was very low in the rankings. But once again, after turning heel, got a lot of people's attention, and that's what Asuka deserves. Shortly after their title win, the Kabuki Warriors were drafted to Raw mid-October, thank you to the WWE Draft. On Raw, Kairi Sane and Asuka quickly got into a rivalry with top stars Charlotte Flair and the current Raw Women's Champion Becky Lynch. Unlike on SmackDown, the Kabuki Warriors got much more TV time on Raw. However, this is not always positive. They were stuck in this weird rivalry because Charlotte and Becky were not tag team partners. They hated each other, but at the same time they were trying to get the Women's Tag Team Championships. They had a very high profile match and they main evented TLC 2019 when the Kabuki Warriors defended the tag team championships against Charlotte and Becky in the first ever TLC tag team match. It was so sad that Kairi Sane got injured mid-match, and Charlotte didn't realize, because I mean she was beating the hell out of Kairi. The match became a mess. At the end of the match, the Kabuki Warriors retained when Asuka unhooked the titles from the ladder, and then there was a brawl with the men, so it wasn't even time to celebrate. It didn't feel as special as it should be. I'm not sure if I'm the only one who felt that way, but it wasn't that memorable, it wasn't that great. And I don't know, this match had all the champions, or the female champions on Raw. Then again, it didn't really feel special. And this led to a feud between Asuka and Becky Lynch for the Raw Women's Championship. You know how WWE loves to put all the champions in the same rivalry for some reason that I will never understand, but this is what happened. So Asuka was one half of the tag team champions, but she was trying to get the singles championship from Becky, and that led to the Kabuki Warriors not defending the championships for months. Asuka had 2 title matches against Becky. The first one at the Royal Rumble 2020, which was a rematch from the year prior. Then Asuka got another title opportunity on Raw, which she lost. Both of these matches were really nice, but for some reason the crowd wasn't into this rivalry. Asuka was portrayed as this unstoppable force once more, spitting the green mist on Becky and on everyone basically, but after everything that Asuka's been through since her WrestleMania loss against Charlotte, I feel like nobody was buying this threat anymore. After her championship loss on Raw, Shayna Baszler debuted as the new NXT call-up. She destroyed 5 women, including Asuka, in that Elimination Chamber match to become the #1 contender for Becky's championship at WrestleMania. They even faked an injury to try to protect Asuka's momentum, but it didn't really work that well. Why? Because at WrestleMania, the only thing that Asuka got was a tag team championship match. Finally, they are defending again against Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross, the former champions. Asuka was trying to do the best she could. She was a workhorse during the pandemic era, let me remind you of that. But this tag team title match at Mania had basically no build-up. The Kabuki Warriors lost the championships against the former champions Bliss and Cross, and this is how Asuka was once again pushed to the side. One more time, it looked like things will brighten up as she won the Women's Money in the Bank ladder match on 2020 in that particular corporate Money in the Bank match. Then again, it wasn't all butterflies and rainbows. Becky Lynch got pregnant, so they decided to give Asuka, who was the owner of the Money in the Bank briefcase, the championship right away. They handed her the title instead of letting her fight for it. And this ruined her one more time because she didn't feel like a champion. She was handed the championship, and just by the fact that she celebrated Becky Lynch's maternity, she became a babyface. Whatever. Something that also made this reign feel meaningless was the fact that her first title defenses were against Nia Jax, and Asuka won in very weird ways because Nia Jax was trying to blame the referees for her loss, and it was simply a mess. Asuka didn't look like a dominant champion, she looked like she was winning by a fluke. After the sloppy matches with Nia Jax, Charlotte Flair was next in line for a Raw Women's Championship opportunity. However, the matches were not good either. She had 2 title matches on Raw, the chemistry was completely off. In one of them, Nia Jax attacked Charlotte, so she was supposed to be injured, so they tried to portray this idea that Asuka couldn't really defeat Charlotte, and the only reason that she did was because Charlotte was injured. I mean, Asuka was sabotaged. There's no other way to say it. They were trying to find ways to make Asuka retain the championship, but at the same time, none of these wins felt special because it didn't look like Asuka was actually winning. It was like there was always an external factor that was making her win, as if she couldn't do it on her own. Then we moved to her feud with the Golden Role Models, finally something that elevated Asuka again. The feud against Sasha and Bayley was great, but why WWE has to ruin everything is something I will never understand. They said, okay, Bayley, Sasha, and Asuka are tearing the house down. They are holding this division during this pandemic era. How can we ruin this? I know how. Let's make Asuka lose the championship in the dumbest way ever. And that's what they did. Asuka lost the physical championship at Extreme Rules when Bayley basically dressed as a referee and count 1, 2, 3 for Sasha to win the championship, sort of. Then Stephanie McMahon appeared the week after telling Sasha that she was done with the Golden Rose models shit, and that Sasha will face Asuka in a match where Bayley and Kairi were banned and they have to face each other one-on-one. And if one of them lose either by disqualification, countout, pinfall or submission, that person will lose and the other will win the championship automatically. We saw, after a grueling match and a very competitive match between the Boss and the Empress, Bayley on the Titantron attacking and beating the hell out of Kairi Sane, who basically forgot how to be a pro wrestler and looked like a little girl getting women handled and doing absolutely anything to defend herself. So Asuka was thorn listening to Kairi scream, "Asuka!" She left the ring, losing by countout and making Sasha a 5-time Raw Women's Champion. That's how Asuka lost her first Raw Women's Championship. So lame. The next pay-per-view on the horizon in 2020 was SummerSlam, where Asuka had a 2-for-1 special. Why? Because she challenged both Sasha and Bayley for the Raw and SmackDown Women's Championships respectively. Both of the matches were bangers. Asuka faced Bayley first, put on an instant classic but lost the championship match. Whereas later that night, she defeated Sasha Banks as they continue with Sasha's curse of not retaining championships, and Asuka became a 2-time Raw Women's Champion. This is the only match that I felt that Asuka actually looked like a real threat and won the championship legitimately. There was no outside interference, there was no external factor that was decisive. I mean, I know Bayley was there, but she was playing this role of not being useful for Sasha, so she didn't really do much, and I am so glad that that happened because finally we saw a title win that was meaningful. The title win was great. Sadly, the booking for the title reign was even worse than the first one. Can you believe that? She had that awful Lumberjill match against Sasha Banks where the Lumberjills didn't even know what they were doing there. The match was so sloppy, it had absolutely nothing compared to the match that they had at SummerSlam the night prior. She also had that weird ass match against Mickie James for the Raw Women's Championship where the ref just stopped the match because he thought Mickie couldn't continue, and it still pisses me off. Then we moved to Clash of Champions where she defended the championship against Zelina Vega. Not that the match was bad, but it was just like a pre-show match. It was destined to be on the pre-show, but thanks to some wrestlers getting COVID, or at least being in quarantine, they were moved to the main card, but the match still felt like a pre-show match because it was built that way. After Zelina Vega, she had some sort of title defenses against Lana. They weren't real matches because there were always someone interfering. So I am not sure what they were trying to do there. This didn't help Asuka's credibility at all. She really looked like an afterthought or a joke, although she was the reigning Raw Women's Champion. I mean, how bad does your booking have to be that the champion looks so insignificant? Looks so unimportant. Asuka was definitely going downhill at this point, and it was so weird because usually when people go down in wrestling is because they stop getting high profile matches and they stop even appearing on TV, but in Asuka's case was the complete opposite. She was always on TV, but all of these times or all of these matches felt so unimportant, so meaningless. I don't even have the words to say how to describe how she was always there. She was at the top, yet she wasn't even the shadow of what she was 2 years before this moment. She used to be the top dog of the division and now she was just a paper champion. And then they had the amazing idea of making Asuka and Lana a tag team, defeating the then champions Shayna Baszler and Nia Jax's team Shania. Lana was injured, Asuka needed to find a new partner, and surprise surprise, the Queen is back as Charlotte Flair returned after a 6-month hiatus to win the championships with Asuka. Asuka became a double champion. She was already a Grand Slam champion as she won all the possible titles on the main roster, and she still didn't feel special. Pairing her with Charlotte was so unnecessary, it felt forced. She had absolutely nothing in common with the Queen. Asuka is such a unique character. She has nothing to do with the Queen type of character that Charlotte portrays. I just don't get what they tried to do there. The only reason why they make these two be a tag team is because they wanted Charlotte to become a Grand Slam champion too. And then they just lost it right away on the next pay-per-view at the Royal Rumble on the pre-show. Can you imagine having Asuka, the Empress of Tomorrow, a double champion, both Raw Women's Champion and Women's Tag Team Champion, defend the championships on the pre-show? And the worst part is that the focus of this match wasn't even in the 4 competitors in the ring. Shayna, Nia, Asuka, they were not important. The only important participant in that match was Charlotte. Why? Because she was having her feud against Lacey Evans and her own dad, Ric Flair. I won't say anything else. She was supposed to lose the championship against Lacey Evans, but she didn't as she got pregnant. And then she lost to it against Shayna Baszler. She did nothing for the rest of the way until WrestleMania. She returned, she kicked Shayna Baszler's ass, but the story was cut there. Then Rhea Ripley debuted after Charlotte challenged Asuka, but she disappeared because she had COVID, I guess. So Charlotte was out, Rhea was in. Rhea issued the challenge, the match happened at WrestleMania, and it was obvious that Asuka was going to lose as Asuka had zero momentum going into WrestleMania. You could tell just by the entrances. Rhea Ripley got a live band entrance. Her entrance was so long and Asuka got a regular entrance. You could tell in that moment who WWE is investing their time in. And Asuka couldn't win a match at Mania again. She has lost all her Mania matches. And she is definitely not the Asuka that was undefeated, that was at the top of their game. She is just the shadow of what she used to be. And just recently at WrestleMania Backlash, when Asuka competed for the Raw Women's Championship against Rhea Ripley and Charlotte Flair, the only reason she was in the match is to take the pin. She was the one pinned by Rhea Ripley again, so that way Rhea would keep the championship, Charlotte would look strong, and Asuka once again was the loser of the match and the afterthought in the division. Commentators say how dangerous and how much of a threat she is, but her booking says otherwise. And fans have realized that Asuka deserves better. And she is my first person in this series of the Rise and Fall, because I think nobody in the current roster have fallen so low like Asuka. And this is so unfair to her. Such an amazing talent being wasted by WWE for years now. And it's such a shame that she's at the top, yet feels so unimportant. Alright, so this was my first Rise and Fall, and it was about Asuka, the Empress of Tomorrow. So this will be it for this video. Let me know down in the comments what are your highlights and what did you like or dislike about Asuka's career. Do you agree with everything that I said? Yes or no, and why? And also let me know which other superstars do you have in mind that you would like to see for this series of Rise and Fall. I would appreciate all of that down in the comment box. Thank you once again for your support. As you know, my name is Alexis. You can talk to me on Instagram if you want to, and I will see you guys next week with another video. Stay safe. Goodbye.